All right, everyone, welcome back to the Mission 300 podcast. Here's the question we're going after today. How do we become internally motivated? And we're going to get into some context for that. One thing that we were discussing is we see a difference between like an external accountability partner versus an internal motivation that just drives you. The last week, we've had a lot of discussions on the disciples of Jesus and the things that they went through to hold to their faith and to confess the truth that he rose from the grave. And that kind of internal motivation led them to torture and death and all these crazy things that they would have given up if they were living a lie. And so how do we develop that kind of internal motivation and fortitude that drives us and not have to rely on constant external things? So let's get into it.
Well, let's begin by framing a question regarding all of this. Like, how do you become internally motivated? And we're going to discuss, I think we need to talk about what is good accountability? What is wrong accountability? Does accountability partners work? Do they not work? One avenue that I think we should maybe take a look at is on the back of my wall is the band of brothers. In a way, they were accountable to each other because they are willing to fight and die for each other. So when we're talking about accountability, there has to be a relationship that person next to you has value of why you're doing what you're doing because it adds value to them as well. And so I'm hoping in all of this that we get away from being externally motivated. What's my reward? What do I get out of it? We've talked about that before in the past, Jason, about how you train a horse or train animals, and actually just picked up a recent book, and it was how they trained a Navy SEAL dog. They actually have to get the dog to want to do what it's doing instead of just being motivated by an external reward. And so I thought it was fascinating. Even animals, to have the real depth of what you need, they need to actually develop an internal motivation. So let's talk about internal motivation. How do we get that? How do we grow it? Where does it come from? And so we talked about earlier on the just before the podcast in our hour-long ribble rabble rants that we do. How do you train a new employee? So if you're a boss of a company, how do you train a new employee to grow into that role? But you're wanting them, especially if you're an owner of the company, you're wanting them to catch the same heart of service that you have. How do you develop that? So I want to throw that out at you of Jason, how do you bring in someone new to your company, of your business that you work at, and train them up to do your job?
So I do have this, it was about a year and a half ago. We brought on this new guy, his early 20s, and he was trying to branch out into the world. This was really going to be his first job that his dad didn't get him, kind of a deal. And he had some family issues going on at home that was making his home life a wreck. And so this was him stepping into, I want to do something and help my family out as a man. And I don't really know where to start. So here I am, kind of a thing. And so one of the things that we were working on is, so I run a coffee shop, and you have this professional aspect of it, but you also have this intensely social atmosphere. And for a lot of young people, their social skills just suck for whatever reason. Maybe it's because we told them all they can't go to school anymore and they have to learn through computers for years. Maybe we told, whatever it was, they don't have the social skills that previous generations did. And so we've worked on little things like, look at this situation, like the next handful of customers that come in, and just observe what me and this other guy do. See if we're joking around, see if we're serious, see if you can figure out why we decide to do that. And he's really grown in it quite a bit, to the point where I feel confident having him run the shop when I'm not there. And so one thing that we ended up doing was taking little areas of something that we could stretch and grow him in, and letting him observe, letting him do, and then letting him run with it. And Brian, one of the things that you had mentioned before was, and it's funny, you didn't even know that we've done this, but we had him just start cleaning, like learning how to mop. Because, and this is going to sound so stupid, but if you've never been taught how to mop, you may not know to wring the mop out your first try. You might, I'm this completely hypothetical, I'm not saying this was the case with this individual. You might just dip the mop in the bucket of water and throw it on the ground soaking wet, not knowing you need to wring it out, and then occasionally re-dip it and re-wring it out because at some point you're just smearing mud. We had to walk through, hypothetically, we had to walk through that. And it was kind of this funny moment of like, I thought everyone just instantly knew how to clean and how to mop. Turns out you actually have to be taught how to clean and how to mop things because we don't know like what level of cleanliness does this need to be at. Is it okay to just wipe it? Does it have to be sprayed with a disinfectant? Do we have to do this or this? And all that stuff has to be taught. And so that's, I mean, that's one example. And I don't know what you guys have in your fields and everything because, but yeah, it's worked out really well for them, honestly.
No, that's really good. Even in our program, the first thing we do when we do our challenges is one of the challenges is you have to make your bed every day. So they have to take a picture of their room every day. And the reason that is because you're trying to move on in other things in life. Number one, coming from the principle of make your bed from the admiral that wrote the book, Make Your Bed, was that in military, you make the bed. So when you come home, you have something that you could say you accomplished. So you could have a totally bad day. So you could have something you say you accomplished. But more importantly, making your bed really isn't just for you. If you ever have a guest over, if anybody shows up, it shows that you put thought into where you are and it adds value to where you are going out. And these are just important aspects of life and trying to internalize that. And you do totally feel better about yourself when you do those little things.
And I should add to it too to kind of tie into your main question because he was at this stage of life where he wanted to step into something. He didn't just look at this as, well, how do I punch a clock and then go home? Like he's taken an ownership in the day to day of the company. He wants to help manage more things. He wants to grow it. He wants to see it succeed because he was in that mind space. Like, I want to do this and I just need someone to give me an opportunity and show me how to function in that environment. If it was, we have a big expansion going on. And if it was happening tomorrow, he'd be the number two guy at it for sure. Like his heart's in the right place. He's put in the work. He's gone through the awkwardness of learning stuff. And so like he had that initial desire that seemed like an internal motivation to develop and grow and connect with the vision, but he needed the guidance along the way to get him there, if that makes sense.
I think too, that stuff sticks with you for your life. When you have one person teach it to you one time, it's not something you're going to forget. Like I remember growing up when I would vacuum the living room or mow the lawn, the first couple times it was like, vacuum the living room? Of course, that's easy. Like just wham, 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 vacuum. Okay, it's generally vacuumed. And then my dad would walk into the room and he would move the chair or there would be like a book sitting on the ground and he would be like, you didn't pick up the book to vacuum under the book like that somebody left there. And I just remember every time I vacuumed, I was like, what's going to take longer for me to listen to a lecture from my dad about how to properly vacuum? So I'm going to spend more time vacuuming anyways. I have to do this before I go do something else. And also, it was something that pleased my dad. Like if I did it well and he didn't even have to think about it and the vacuuming was done right, it got to the point where it'd be like, oh man, if my dad's coming home, maybe I can vacuum before he gets home. So when he gets home, then we can go do something together. Like he's not going to have to be thinking there's chores to be done in the house because I could take advantage of my dad's time for other stuff since he was busy working. And so that stuck with me in everything to the point where even now when I vacuum my own apartment, if I don't get it detailed, I'll lose my mind. Like if I don't vacuum every little bit until I make sure it's fully clean, move stuff to vacuum under that. And it kind of works in the rest of other parts of life of like that level of excellence because there's something that trains in your mind and your motivation for doing something right the first time, not coming back to it to do it a second time because you missed a detail. And so it's kind of like a funny example. Like people are probably listening going, mopping. Well, okay, maybe you need to learn to mop, I guess, but that's just mopping. That doesn't matter. Well, I think Tommy probably has some better examples for us of, hey, well, the details matter when you get into something big with sales and you want to remember everything that you need to say. How are you going to sell this? I'm sure Tommy can expound on that, but that's like stuff that's even stuck with my life for like when it comes to other projects. Sometimes it comes back to bite me because I'm a bit of a perfectionist now to where I'm like, if it's not done perfectly right, I can't. Which my dad also was like, it's better 80% done than 20% done if you're going to take a month to do this thing. So, there's balance, of course, but it's way more relevant than you would think. Like you're saying, Brian, the making the bed. It matters more than just making your bed for yourself. And that transitions into a lot of other parts of life.
Well, I was just gonna add, Caleb, too, like there's kind of like the age old adage of like detailitis of like having to get all the details right. And I think there's a good mix of like, okay, you need to get the details down correctly, but then you also just need to get over the fear of like doing something wrong potentially as well. Like the first time you do something, it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be right. But that's where like the learning comes in, is by doing. The other thing I picked up from just this conversation here was like, man, how many times I've seen in my life where I'm too afraid to ask the question of something I don't know how to do, and I break something, get something wrong in that process. And so like I think a part of leaning into that is also being the one who is being taught something, is being willing to ask questions to understand. And I think that's what I'm looking for. Like if I was to hire an employee that was going to take my role in the coming months, is I want to train them. I want them to walk with me, but I want them to ask the questions of like, so that they learn how to do the things. I think of like one of our Man versus Wild trips, Stan the man, the cooking legend. He brought a 4-wheeler and it was manual. He's like, "Oh yeah, you know how to drive one of these, right?" And I can't say no to Stan. And I'm like, yeah, I know how to do that. I didn't know how to, but I was like, I'm going to learn, and I'm not going to look like a fool in front of Stan. Well, I just had to ask. It came down to the point of like, okay, you have to ask and look dumb, because that's how you can learn. And once I asked, Stan was like, oh, yeah, totally. Like, I'm going to love to show you how to do this. Like, and it almost became a moment for him to almost father me and learning how to use a manual like 4-wheeler that I just would have never learned if you never asked. And I think of like so many different examples in my life of like, if I didn't ask like these silly, stupid questions, like I would just go on trying to do something that I didn't fully understand. And that's where I think like the details matter. You also have to be willing to just try it anyways. And if you throw it in the wrong gear and you kill it, okay, you learn. But there's something I think too to asking like the questions of that person that's teaching as well.
So 2 observations in this is, number 1, when we're talking about like doing these basic things, whether it's cleaning or this stuff that doesn't feel like it's valuable, it starts exposing your heart. Are you doing that action, like whether it's vacuuming or whether it's mopping, to get the job done so you can move on to something else? Or are you actually doing it because it's going to matter to the people that come after you? It's going to matter to the way the shop operates. It's going to matter to, maybe in a case of your boss, not trying to please them, but for them to see, wow, he'll get jobs done that I ask him to do with excellence. Like, you're doing it not for you. And I think that's why we don't like those little jobs. It's like, well, it doesn't matter to me whether my bed's made or not. It doesn't matter to me whether my floor's mopped or not. It doesn't matter to me whether I live like a slob or not. That's my choice. Yeah, it is your choice. But if you want to start affecting other people where you're actually influential and you actually can make a difference outside of your own world, there's things you're going to need to do. And this is kind of where you start that. So you're not doing it for you. You're doing it for a bigger picture. And I think that starts that internal out of motivation. That's number 1. The second thing is, you brought up being afraid to ask, the humility of that. And it really just kind of occurred to me as you're saying that, Jesus says, ask that you may receive, that your joy may be full. I've always kind of thought of that from like, I need this, I need that, I need this, that kind of asking. But it seems to me the asking from a father where your joy will be full is when you ask, I don't know how to run this piece of equipment, or I'm not able to do this job well because I don't understand. And you get the learning, and now all of a sudden it adds value. You're joyful, and right? And it says the joy set before you endure. So once the joy and the understanding hits, you can endure pretty much whatever you're in the middle of to move forward in. Thought that was kind of a thought just kind of starts making sense. I know I'm applying it maybe out of context, but I think there's a huge value to that. So that is the shift of getting to be internally motivated versus externally motivated. So keep in mind, the one, you're on a job, maybe you're afraid of what the boss is going to think. So you're doing everything to please the boss, but you're really not doing your job right. You're just doing things to please the boss. Because the boss wants you to please the customer, please the other employees. He wants you to do your value so the other parts work. You're doing it to please the boss. That's a fear of man. Then you have, well, I don't really care. I'm just going to get it done. I want to earn a paycheck, and it's wrong that they're making me do this stupid stuff anyway. Then you need to quit and go sit at home, because you're only thinking about yourself, and you're a victim, and victims can't learn. Victims can't grow until they come to the point where I need to learn something new. even a true victim has to learn a new way of thinking, a new way of living, a new way of stepping out. And so you're kind of stuck till you're really able to come to the end of yourself. So those two pieces are important. So the fear of man or being a victim will cause you not to grow, truly. But when you start seeing a value that you're doing it for the boss and for the employees, but even if they don't even notice it, even if they say nothing, you know you gave your very best. That is something that goes with you no matter where you go. And you become, in a sense, a Joseph. You become valuable in every situation you're put in. So that's kind of the targeting. How do we develop that in other people?
Yeah, that kind of leads into kind of where I was. I mean, we talked about it before the podcast here, but give everyone some context. Like in my work, I've had one of the best quarters, the best quarter I've had in my career in sales. And yet I feel like this previously it was like, oh, I need to hit this number at a certain amount of income, can do this amount for this. And now all of a sudden I'm kind of at this place where I'm like, I don't really feel that. Like, yeah, I'm happy. I'm excited, but it's not like motivating. It's not like fulfilling in a sense. It is to do good work. That is fulfilling, but it's no longer like I thought it'd be a bigger number, right? Like I thought once I hit like this number, I would be like content maybe and feel this sense of just whatever. And now I've hit a number that's the biggest number I've hit in my career, and it's a lot lower than that other number. And yet I still feel this like lack of motivation. And maybe it's a lack of external motivation. But now when it comes to like training someone, and I know in myself, like there's an internal motivation of like doing good for the customer and like solving problems. And it's not necessarily about the external reward, which is money, right? Which money is ultimately just an exchange, right? So it's got some value to it, but it's a medium of exchange. And if I'm no longer hung up by that being like the ultimate goal in my life, like I'm now have this internal motivation to just provide a good service, and with that comes the reward. But how do you train someone in that maybe doesn't necessarily have that yet? Like, where does that come from? And I guess I'm experiencing it myself, but I don't necessarily know how to like put into words or put into action training someone to come behind me that's motivated by internal motivations, not by the external of like, you need to have this amount in sales, or you need to hit this goal, hit this number. And it's so interesting because I've never felt that pressure from my boss at all. Like he's never put a quote on. Like the quota is generic. It's like, okay, you'll know when you're not hitting it. And it's like, what does that mean? Like, you'll know when you're not hitting it. And it's like, okay, now I have to kind of find this for myself. And I guess maybe you guys lean into that a little bit of like, how would you train someone to be internally motivated?
Well, I think first of all, when you're hiring, so if we're looking at it from a job, you're like a boss wanting to hire someone. Do you hire someone that is skilled at what you need, or do you hire someone that can learn what you need them to do?
I would say probably someone who can learn.
But how do you meet your demands if you need a certain skill level? Like in your case, you have an engineered product. How do you meet that demand if everyone's being trained? When at some point you need someone who knows how to do a very specific thing that have trained themselves so you can add. How do you get that and get someone that can learn? Where's the mix?
You got to find like the perfect person, someone with the skill and willing to learn. It's hard to find though. That's the thing is like, how do you, like, I don't even know. How do you look for that? How do you find that?
I can give a specific example because my boss took a risk with me on that because I did not have technically what he needed when he was looking to hire somebody, which was very specifically experience filming hunting animals. And I had never done that before in my life, but I was very enthusiastic to him. Like, I love video. The outdoors is my passion. This is related to the process of what I want to learn. And so it was more me trying to convince him that I could be that person for him. Even though even myself, I was like, well, I don't know. We're going to have to find out, I guess, the hard way. But it took him bringing me out to the state of Oregon, going on a hunt that had no stakes with him, to go film a little bit and then me putting together a video for him. That's a little bit easier because it's very practical. Like you take somebody out to go do the video itself, you see if they have the skills to make something. And, you know, is that different than like making a sale where it would take more time to train? Yes, but even like learning how to be a cameraman on a hunt to not disturb the animal, all these different practical things. I think, you know, from my perspective, being the employee trying to convince the boss that I am that person, I was trying to show I don't have the technically exact skills you need right now, but I have the life skills that teach you those specific skills. So like I came and showed that I was hardworking, I was motivated. You wouldn't have to ask me to do something. I'm going to do it on my own. And all these different practical life skills contribute to a like very technical exact skill, but they have to, that technical exact skill has to be supported by a practical life skill. Because that's what makes, to me, in my mind, working with some of my friends on video projects. Who do I want to hire out of my friends? It's not the person who maybe is technically the best at doing a particular thing. It's a person who's well-rounded, so it's easy to talk to them. It's easy to communicate with them working on this thing, which makes for an all-around better product. So I think when it comes to how do you teach someone to be like you, Tommy, you would go, well, I want to teach this person practical life skills because look what my practical life skills brought me specifically in this area. That's why I think, Tommy, like if you quit your job today and you went and did sales somewhere else with something you have completely no knowledge about, I would be like, yeah, of course Tommy's going to do it. What do you mean he has to go sell spaceships for Elon Musk? Yeah, he's going to figure it out. It'll be more work, sure. But it's like the same concept because Tommy has the practical life skills to do that. So if it came to an employee in that case, I would want to go, okay, how do I father this person to have those practical life skills to make those technical skills come naturally because they have the things that you need to gain those skills. That's what I look for in my own life to go do a job that I think right now I can't. Like I go, who do I need to become to go make a documentary? Because maybe I have some of the technical knowledge, but really you won't get the technical knowledge until you practically go do it. So who do I need to be right now? So that way in a year I could go show up on this, maybe not be as knowledgeable, but I'm going to work harder than the knowledgeable person and be able to go pull it off. So that's a long roundabout way of, you know,
So
saying.
let me summarize something you said. That was very well, good insight, you guys. There's the two parts. There's one, you're finding an individual that may not have the skills, but they have the aptitudes in life that those skills can be easily taught or easily obtained because you have everything else to make that job grow versus someone who's just really good at one thing, but everything else is so frustrating. You don't want to, it's hard to take the time. So for those who are looking to be mentored or looking for kind of a father figure, there's two parts to this. One, you have to look at an individual that's coming into work that I need to be able to pull something out of them. Part of it is employers, or in a case of an employer, I just want someone who could move a piece of paper from X to Z. So you're just hiring a specific skill. You don't care how they can talk. You don't care. I just need them to, as cheaply as possible, move something from X to Z. That's some types of hiring. And the problem is the people that go there, that's all they're wanting too. So it's a frustrating thing. And the money of the company is just moving this thing from X to Z. Okay. So that's your job. Then there's like, I need to bring someone in that values the company, that can grow and that can kind of grow into things. So that being the boss or the owner, you have to be willing to have some flexibility to bring in a new flavor. And so you're working with that, but you need someone who has some kind of background. Like Caleb, you just got done doing the Appalachian Trail. You had just got done self-motivating yourself to accomplish this major task. You love your camera work and you had camera experience prior to this. So it wasn't like you had never used a camera and you're jumping into something new. You had that. You just had never applied it in this type of specific application, but you had all the tools that we're building up, which is why make your bed, learn how to clean, learn how to take care of yourself, because those things pay off when someone is looking for skills. Even if they aren't asking for that, they notice it. They notice how detailed you are. They notice how do you value things. If someone is really good at something but is just sloppy with life, you automatically know you got a mess coming in. It's like I'm always going to have to be cleaning up something because you don't value anything else but what you're doing in that moment. And so that's something when you're picking someone. But I'm going to go back to something from a Bible perspective that I think is super important, that somehow we believe that God picked people in the Bible, that was the only person that could have been picked to do that. And it really is not a true statement. God was looking for anyone. It was just that one had prepared themselves to be used in a different level. So for instance, you wouldn't have a King David picked the shepherd boy, the one on the outskirts, this outsider, had he not been someone who cared about the sheep that he was taking care of, had he not been someone who was willing to put himself at risk for the sake of the sheep. And it wasn't just the sheep itself. He wasn't necessarily this animalitarian. Is that what that word is? He isn't just someone I love animals, because he was preparing these animals to be killed. So it wasn't their food, all right? But he cared for them because they were his father's. So he was working in a manner for someone else and to care for the animals in the best way. So they're the healthiest, most lively, whether it was for the fur, for the hair or whatever. And so he killed a bear, he killed a lion, he risked his life. He put himself outside for the sake of this role that benefited other people. He didn't make much money doing it. It really didn't personally add value to him being a good shepherd. It added value to those who he was shepherding for. And so that's how he works. So now when you're thinking, what kind of heart do you want to be a king? Okay, he ain't ready to be a king. It's 14 years from the time he's picked till he actually becomes a king. What kind of person do you want that's going to be a king? Someone with that. I can train everything else, but I need that in order. He was already kingly. Let's take a flip over to Gideon. Gideon is the guy picked, right? This one random guy that's picked, and the angel comes, you mighty valiant man, and 300 men surround him. Well, so part of that story that's missed is his whole tribe was blessed to be deliverers. The whole blessing on them, the whole thing that was spoken over them, their tribe was to be two horns to drive out the enemy. They were given the land that was the hardest because they were designed to go drive out the enemy. So everyone in his tribe had the blessing and the inspiration and the spiritual favor, even if you would say, to go and drive out the enemy. Every one of them, but no one chose to do it. They practiced other things. They practiced self-seeking. They practiced their idol worship, which means finding something else to satisfy them. Gideon, however, something about him, he still trained with his sword, right? He didn't all of a sudden go to battle and never used his, I got this sword, the sword of the Lord in Gideon. I guess I should probably start doing something with this. No, and he's risking himself out in the field when everyone else is hiding to get some kind of food to bring back home. That's courageous. Like, he's bold, but anyone could have done this. But God found someone who is willing to step out. So even when you're coming to God, who God picks, it's not so random. People have prepared their hearts and this connection takes place. Now, God wants everyone, but we prepare ourselves to go be mentored. So part of this, if you're listening on the other end looking for a job, take care of yourself, be detailed, comb your hair, take a shower, dress nicely as you can. You don't need to overdress. You're not dressing to impress. You're dressing to show value, that you value yourself. So everything you do is providing that even if you don't have that technical skill, you are ready to be launched in. And then as an employer, you're looking for someone that you can complete, that you could trust, that can learn and do a job well. Because technical skills can be taught, but those other pieces, you have to develop those.
I kind of have one theory which I would like to run by you guys, and you could tell me if you think I'm wrong or not. But I think when it comes to these things of being the person who gets the job, David being King David, Gideon being, like, when we think Gideon, we're thinking he's the man who led the 300. I think all these men, or even in this case, Tommy, having the best quarter of his life or year of his life for sales wise, I think in all these cases, the person who was capable of doing these things, all these men were that before the moment that it happened. Like, specifically, the example I have in my head is on the Appalachian Trail. I kept on thinking to myself the whole time, I'm going to be a through hiker the moment I get to the top of the last mountain, or I'm going to be someone who like was capable of completing the Appalachian Trail. I only get that qualification when I'm at the very last mountain. And I can't say very specifically when it happens before, but I think a lot of this stuff, you become that person sometime in between in the process. And the moment that like people see you getting this title is just the evidence that you were that person. Like I'm thinking of Mark Dowdle, who recently won the Arrowhead 135 miles. I think the moment that he became the person who won Arrowhead wasn't even necessarily at the race or who could win Arrowhead. It's not like we figured out Mark could win it when he was this many miles into the race and still ahead of second place. And I think people are looking for like this moment of like, well, I'll be the person like me. I could be looking at my job and be like, well, I could film hunting, once I've filmed hunting and know that I can. I think there has to be some mentality before that I am this person now, and you have to do the process. So maybe, Tommy, that's goes into my theory of maybe that's why it's not like this big dopamine rush of I've hit my, my best sales, blah, blah, blah. Because it didn't really change who you were the moment you hit that. You had already been the person you needed to be able to do that. So that's kind of my theory, Tommy, as to maybe why you're like, cool, I guess, like, I know that feeling. I reached the top mountain and I was expecting this big emotional rush of like, I've made it, finally, thank goodness. And it was kind of like, yeah, I guess I'm the person I need to be to do this now. But it was probably 200 or 300 miles before I made it there that I was that person. So that's kind of my running theory. And I think that goes for in life. And it's helpful to know that too, because that way when you get in Tommy's position where you've made it, that's not like the be all end all. Like even Mark, who ran that, posted on his story earlier today, he's going to do this race, this really big race related to Tommy's hat next week. And he was like, I have peace about it. And he was relating it spiritually to God and everything. But I think it's because he knows he's the person who he needs to be to do his very best at this race. He's not nervous because I didn't prepare enough, blah, blah, blah. It was somewhere in the process that he fell in love with that and became who he needed to be. And so when I hear Tommy talk about that stuff, I'm like, honestly, I'm not surprised because I know that feeling. And you're kind of like, what's the next thing? Because who do I need to become so that way when the next thing comes, I'm ready? Like that's for everything. My first documentary, it's technically done right now. It's supposed to be released tomorrow. I'm like, whatever. Like the best part was filming it, being out there, editing it, doing the process. Now that it's done, I'm like, well, I need to find the next thing or who do I need to become for the next thing?
Caleb, I think that's just pure gold right there, because I think that's exactly what I'm feeling is like, it's almost like, why should I be surprised that I actually did the things that I trained for, the things I trained to become, the things that I now am? Why am I surprised that that is happening? Like it shouldn't be like a surprise. It almost like should be expected because that's what I've been training for. That's what I've been going after, right? Like it's the same thing with like all of us here, but like specifically like with Mark, like he was training to win Arrowhead. Like why, like he shouldn't be surprised that he won with all the training, all the work and all the stuff that went into it. Like, yes, you can celebrate that. And yes, it is awesome. But at some point it's just kind of like, isn't this what we expected? And then like with that too, of like knowing your relationship with God and like, I don't want to get too prosperity or too like whatever, but like blessings do come from God. And like when you're putting in the work and then you receive that blessing from your father, like that shouldn't be a surprise. Like it should almost like you're thankful for it, but it's like, that is what I was here to do. And now I've accomplished it. But I think it's important, like what you're saying, Caleb, is now what am I training in myself for what's next? Because there is another thing coming and I can't just sit back and become content with who I am now. Like there's always another thing to go after. And who do I need to become to go after that thing? And maybe for myself, it's no longer a sales number, but it's how do I train other salespeople to hit their goals so that we can grow a company, we can scale a company, all that stuff, right? That's the maybe the new target. And maybe that's the new thing I have to train for is like, yeah, I could do it all myself, but could I help someone else actually achieve this? Like, could I actually help someone else change their life?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I do think one clarification that I would also add is I think if Mark hadn't have won, he still would have been just as satisfied because he still did his best. He still did his very best, and he had prepared, and he became the person to run in the process. Like, even in the race, there's a clip he records where he's like, there's a moment where we'll know whether I'm going to finish this race or win this race or lose this race. And he's like, well, I'm for sure going to finish this race. But he's like, it's the moment where we'll know that, where I'll know that this process was worth it and I've become the person I need to essentially finish this thing. So even Mark, to clarify, he did not expect to win necessarily because, it's a race against other people. Like, it's not just against himself. And I do think there's an element too where there is still some satisfaction in the process where even if there is, like, let's say Mark hadn't have won, knowing Mark, I think his reaction would have been the same. Like, I don't think it would have been different because he had still become the person he wanted to in the process. Is there like a nice final moment that gives you that evidence? Yes. But even like, I know it's easier for me to say because I happened to finish it before that last mountain closed on the Appalachian Trail. But I had even told my dad when I was like within however far of finishing the Appalachian Trail, which was getting close to the time that the last mountain closes. It closed a few days after I summited. I said to him, I said, even if I don't get to finish the last 5 miles, I've gotten everything I need to. Like, my perspective, who I am, has shifted. And so, yes, that's awesome. But I think too, there is like this in the process, like just that identity being instilled in you, where even if the exact outcome wasn't perfect, because it happens in little things in life, right? Like, I'll even say with this documentary that I've been working on, I could have spent another month or two on it. Like, I'm judging myself in all the ways that it's not perfectly finished, but at least I was still the person who could finish it and do these things, even if it could have been done better in some ways with more time. But I just want to add that clarification too, because somebody could put their whole heart into the process, and I've done it before, and maybe the exact outcome isn't there, but it would still be really important to look and go, did I become the person I needed to be to do my best at this and with excellence? I think that's kind of too what we've been talking about, is this motivation towards excellence in the process. Because that's what people we look up to have. They have this motivation towards excellence that's internal, of doing the most excellent job that they can do. And we just happen to see the people who are all producing some of the biggest results. But there's like, you could look back and go, wow, I've made my bed every day for a year. You don't have to post that on social media. Nobody's going to give you an award for that. There's not really like a practical thing that comes from that. But at least you could look back and go, in that process, I became that person who could do that and live excellently. So I do want to clarify that as well, because not the end result doesn't always go perfectly.
Jason, I know there's a comment that you wanted to add into this. I wanted to throw in a couple things for the listener to, like, where do you start? Because we initially said, how do you become internally motivated? So we're discovering these are how we're observing someone and what kind of person needs to be to pull that out. But how do we actually become this excellent spirit? Right? The spirit that Daniel had, the spirit that Joseph, they had this excellent spirit. There was something about them that you knew was valuable, like that was of great value. And I watch, even though we're using the running examples, we're using the different kind of job examples. One thing that really resonates is, like, Tommy used that word blessing. Blessing isn't an outcome. We've kind of, even in our Christian terms, you use terms that are outcome based versus they're what you are. So almost every term that God speaks to people is what they are. He doesn't discuss outcome because he knows if you know what you are, and I can empower that, outcome is the result. So, like, for instance, he says, if you meditate on the word day and night, you'll be like a tree. You will be of good success. So this is the process of development. So the blessing was what you are. When we start seeing the blessing, it's because we're finally allowing it to grow in us, but it's not the outcome, which is why we get disappointed, because we've been so outcome based. But if we're income based, or we already have it, that is just the fruit that's coming out. And so it's important that gear shift, but our world, it's contrary to a world thinking. It's absolutely contrary, because in our world, we're nothing. and we're trying to become something. If you don't have any belief, you're basically an evolved amoeba trying to become a better amoeba. Like you're a nothing trying to become a better something. And in Christianity or in a relationship with a father and a son, when you have a son, there's something that you value that you want better than you. And so you pour into that individual for them to rise higher than what you are and to continue a legacy beyond what you are. And that's what God does with us. So part of it is a big shift of thinking that we have to have, that we already have it. Now we're releasing it out.
And one of those things, at least in my experience, to start kind of moving towards that right understanding of who you are, the internal motivation. Sometimes you have to just let other things go. And a couple of times for me, it's been relationships with people that were refusing to mature and grow the way that they needed to. It's hard at times because you have roots with people and a history, and even in my case, business relationship with people that you're trying to build something, but you have it's becoming an external carrot that you never actually catch. And you have to let go of that to discover what can remain that is internal. And sometimes that's a real awkward, painful process, but it's like getting clean when you've been an addict for years. It's really good and healthy. And I know for some people that's a really simple starting point. Not easy, but it's very simple.
Yeah, we've talked about this over the last several podcasts. So if you go back and listen, these are like all building blocks that we keep putting together. One, you discover God wants to father you. And we talked about this on the last podcast, like God's whole plan, like all of Easter, his death, burial, resurrection, all of humanity, everything that has gone on was his deep desire that we could be one with him. That has been his pursuit since creation of man, all the way through. When you kind of know that why, that's what he was pursuing, it helps you understand a whole lot of different pictures. So you're pursued, but we have to respond to it. There's a response that we do to it. So being in a group can help you get using some external motivation to get the fire going. You start seeing other people do it. Wow, they're succeeding at this. Wow, I'm interested in that. It creates an interest. But that's why then we switch to, because external will fade off. You'll keep needing that external, and you're not an animal. And even animals get tired of it after a while. So there's this external. But then when the internal comes, where you start doing it because you believe you're able to. That's where we do little things like start running a mile every day, or at least walking. Create some kind of habit. Do 15 minutes of something in a day over a consistent amount of time. Habits are like cleaning your room. You become having an eye for what looks clean, that you know is clean, that when you do other projects, it just becomes part of you, that you do it. Those keep you going when the external motivation dies. That's where habits are your support of what you build as habits. And when you know that you're not doing it just for you, you're doing it for others, you need groups of people around you. And this might be counterintuitive. I am not a big fan of our traditional view of what accountability groups are. Usually an accountability group is you meet with another group of guys and you're going to ask each other a question. Did you do X this week? Did you do Y this week? Did you complete this week? Did you do this week? And it's all these external actions that you did or didn't do determine whether you had a good week or not, right? And then the person leading the group, you don't really get to know them. They're the boss. So you don't get to know about how they did for the week. You're just knowing how you did for the week. And then if you're not doing it right, you don't want to be kicked out of the group. So you'll start not really saying everything. And I've noticed this even when we did our challenges. There's some of us on this podcast that did great at the challenges, and others would start drifting and fading, and you stop hearing from them on the podcast, on our challenge app that we were using. And they started drifting away, and it's like, what's happening? Because they don't want to come and say, I'm just being lazy. They have all these other reasons why they couldn't do this 10 minutes. They just couldn't do it. Life was just all of these things, right? All the excuses. All right. That's why it doesn't work like that. But because we're friends and we know each other, we can give each other grief over this kind of stuff. Because at the end of the day, we're all trying to become better. We're all trying to grow together. So camaraderie on a project is very different than a quote unquote accountability. That's cold. It's calculating. It's reward discipline level. This is, if someone in the group, we're going to give them grief over it, but deep down, we care why you're not getting there. How can we help you get there? And it's a different process because everyone's naturally vulnerable. We don't have to sit around a campfire and share all of our personal weaknesses. We're doing life together. You already kind of know the personal weaknesses, and it becomes natural, and you want to do it for the other guy, and you care about the other person. So it's a different group, quote unquote, accountability. It's camaraderie that takes place. That really is the grouping that you need to change. And then from that place, you have to start going into internal, that you're not doing it for the group, or you're not doing it because of the group. You're doing it because you care about lifting them, that when I do it, it inspires them. Now it's for the group, and it becomes something different.
And Caleb, before you jump in there, real quick, what I have noticed, and this would be something we can expand on another time, the modern accountability group, there's 99% of guys have this built-in internal red flag to it, because all it is a bunch of guys trying to be moms to each other. And no guy needs that or wants that at this stage of the game. What we need is a brotherhood, and it's so different from, well, let's get coffee once a week and you tell me all the times you sinned and I'll tell you all the times I sinned and then we'll see you next week. We don't need moms with facial hair helping us out, because we hate that and we'll avoid it and we'll eventually either lie or give up, like you said, Brian. But there's such a difference when you have a brotherhood around you that will lift you up because you've lifted them up, and we can do that. And that's ultimately something everyone craves. And I think one reason we don't give up the motherhood accountability group thing is because we actually don't have the brotherhood. And we're worried that if we give up the mommy accountability group, we won't have anything.
Well, I'm going to add one more piece why we don't give it up, is because the fear of man is much more quick of accomplishment than the fear of God. It's easier to create a group that you're afraid of being shamed in the group than a true fear of God, where I don't care what you guys think, I'm not going to do that, or I am going to do that because I care about what God thinks about me. We do not teach the fear of God, we teach the fear of man, which is interesting why we have all the problems even in Christendom, is because that's what we've taught. We haven't taught, how can I fear God? And when you fear God, I'm not talking about being terrified of him, but think about a person that you don't want to tell, if I tell them I did that, then they're going to think this. And okay, that's the fear of man, versus God already knows everything about you. And now it's like, God, you already know everything about me. How do I please you? And all of a sudden now you add value to other people's lives, versus you're dependent on their approval to determine whether I'm in the accountability group or out of it. Think about a rehab center. When do you get out? When they determine that you've completed your task. And then you're out. How long are you out for? What's the recidivism rate before you come back? And I'm not saying don't do that. There is a place for that. Some people are so out of control, they need something to kind of grab a hold of their bootstrap. But at some point, it has to be their choices with God, not because the man will approve of me.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And it's really important to have a group of guys who will publicly bully you on a podcast instead of somebody who will just soothe you for doing wrong. Of course, I'm kidding. But the thing is with me too, like it doesn't, I'm totally okay with it because Brian and I go way back. We know that it's just jesting. And the funny part is too, no matter what Brian says, unfortunately, it's not going to make a difference to me actually doing the thing because I'm so not motivated. Unfortunately, I almost wish I was because then having Brian in my life, I'd be like, yeah, okay, I'm going to do all these habits. Unfortunately, I'm still not motivated by people calling me out on stuff. But I think that also is a good thing because you can have the guys call you out on stuff and maybe that'll motivate you, but the day they're not doing that, what are you doing then? Right. And so unfortunately, although like I would like Brian saying something, it's more just a good reminder for me, but my mind has been so set on really ultimately the only person you can answer to and be motivated by is the Lord. Like growing up, that was my dad. When it came to the vacuuming and the mowing, it was like, oh man, my sisters, this is so funny. I would always complain about my sisters if it was their turn to trim the weeds along the edge of the house and I was mowing. I would go, Dad, the mowing, I can't get it done correctly because they're not trimming out far enough. Well, he was like, well, you're the man, you should just go clean up their job. Like, you're only accountable to yourself. Your sisters, you know, they're whatever they do, it doesn't matter. So it was so instilled to me to the point where now in my life, God is my father. It doesn't matter what Brian says, unfortunately, because I have to answer to God. And that's also a good thing, because Brian doesn't even have as high accountability or expectations or love for me as God does, in a good way, not in a bad way. And the verse that has always come to my mind is, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters, since you know that you will not receive that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as reward. It is the Lord Christ. And that saved me so many times in my life as well, where I've been working with other employees who are kind of like, don't work that hard, because I've literally had people tell me, don't work that hard because now there's more expectations from us. And they don't play it like that. They say there's going to be more expectations on you. And what if you don't always want that? And I go, well, it's not really for my boss. Like, it's kind of hard to explain to somebody who doesn't have the spiritual perspective. But even us doing these group challenges, like, could I do it for myself? Yeah, I guess that's good for me. I guess that's good. Could I do it because I know it would make Brian happy, because he puts all the work into planning these things and dedicates time to make these things for us, which I'm grateful for. Could I do it for that? Could I do it because it'll benefit other people around me? Sure, I guess. But all of that kind of tends to fade away after like a week for me. Usually it's like 24 hours. But so I really have to constantly remind myself it's for the Lord that I'm doing it. And in these cases where it is this monthly challenge, I know that it's something God wants me to do, not just because Brian wants me to do, right? Because there's things that God wants to teach me in doing these discipline things, whether that's going to the gym, walking or running for a mile. So I wanted to add that clarification, because I know the temptation is to be soothing, like you were saying, Jason, like you see in a men's group. To me, that's immediately repulsive, like to be soothing towards each other in that mothering way, because you're harming yourself and other people by doing that, because you all end up in this soup, like primordial soup that's just going to sink away and not grow into anything. You have to actively challenge yourself, others, and ultimately you have to accept the challenge from the Lord and hear his voice. And I think that's ultimately what we see in these motivations for people who have excellence. It's the Father's voice that moves them, because it's throughout the Bible, it's the Father's voice that moved these men to do great things. It wasn't like the other disciples being like, oh yeah, we should go do this or that. It was ultimately Jesus's voice when he said, come follow me. They weren't answering to anybody else. And so I think that's really important. Even when you do have a great group like Tommy, Jason, and Brian that I have, who will remind me of these things, even that's not enough. And I have some of the best, I'd argue, not just to like gas up everybody. Genuinely, when you have somebody who's willing to push you like that, I know from experience, even that is not enough. It has to be God. So even if you find that awesome, but truly find it with the Lord and the Father's voice, I would say.
Well, I've discovered on this podcast to not have my values in the opinions of you guys. So thank you, Caleb, for bringing clarity of my value point. No, this is good. And actually everything that Caleb's saying is how we designed our relationships and everything else. God doesn't do this either. God does not corner you into having to perform for him. You get to choose. You get to choose every day. And so he doesn't want you performing. In fact, it says there is a man that says, yes, I'll do that, but then doesn't do it. And then a man that just says, no, I'm not going to do it. And then later comes back and says, I'm wrong, I'm going to go do it. Which one was pleasing to the master? It's the one that said no. So the power to say, no, I'm not going to do it is not a defiance. I think sometimes you're settling within yourself. I need to settle for myself why I'm doing these things. But then having an open heart going, okay, yeah, I need to go get this done or go do this. Way better than the people pleaser that says, yes, I'll do it. And then it's just, it's like you're a canker sore to life, to everybody else. It's because the moment you think of that person, you're like, they're not going to get it done. I'm just going to hear good words. I don't know if we've actually answered the question from our original reason we started today's podcast over becoming internally motivated, but I'm going to leave this one internal motivation of love being internally motivated. I love finding the reason and going after it. I love blocking out everyone's view and I'm going to go do this great regardless of the outcome. And when I go to the gym, when I've started running, I used to have to be emotive. Okay, what's the prize? Why do I want to do this? What's the value in doing it? And I have changed so much in my thinking regarding that I use it as training tools for me. Like if I'm in the gym, it's like, man, I'm really whooped today. I do not want to lift that. My brain has now quit saying that because I will actually go do more. Like I've been deliberately punishing. I know that's going to be hard for you guys for some of you listeners going, what? I punish my brain when it says no now. I have come to the point where I'm working on a project, man, I'm just done. Forget it's not work. Now I'll actually go further and redo it. Like I have deliberately started punishing myself. And because I've meditated on the 2 Corinthians where you take captive every thought. And when it comes into obedience, once it's obedient, begin punishing disobedience. Like I won't let my thoughts go that way because I've realized in just life of developing people and working and really the whole fathering idea and seeing young people come into their own of what they are, creating an environment where you allow them to choose, and you have to have the competitive rivalry because that kind of hardens you in a good way. I like the rivalry not to make me motivated, but to make me still be focus on me being good at what I'm doing and being able to deal with all of the banter that goes around, but helping them discover you're going to have to do hard things. And the harder you do it because you want to do it, it's going to make you great. And so they can start seeing this is a building block to everything else. We become Gideons, we become Davids, we become Samsons, we become these characters when we establish, I already have been blessed and I'm not seeing the fruit of it, but I'm going to stay at it and give whatever, like the verse you just said, Caleb, whatever your hand finds to do it mightily as unto the Lord and not unto men. So whatever you're in them, if you're doing your homework, if you're doing studies, if you're cleaning your room, you do it as hard as you can. Like when I say hard, as in the best that you have to offer as an offering unto the Lord, just because you love him, not because you have to, not because he's more pleased with you. You don't get a different shower of blessing, but it prepares you to be positioned because opportunities will come. And it positions you just like you, Tommy. It positioned you just like you, Caleb. It positioned you, Jason, like even in getting your job and your role with what you're doing. It positioned you because you did these things. Now you're able to step into the next realm. And it should never be, the reward should never be the outcome of those areas. Keep in mind, King David never wanted to be king. He was willing to give it up at any point. He never asked to be king. He never wanted to be king. But that's where his identity took him into being kingly. And so it's what he was, the greatest king that ever ruled over Israel. And so besides Jesus coming around. So that's what we are. So all these things is because of what we are. So we work hard because it's what we are. I am a hard worker. I am skilled. I am valuable. I am influential. I am blessed. So I work hard and the fruit of it will be what it is.
I think that's so big, Brian. And it reminds me of a question that I do ask myself a lot, which is I kind of like to strip away when it comes to when I'm doing something and moving towards something, strip away every motivation. Like I go, what if this aspect was taken away? What if this aspect was taken away? Like I ask myself, okay, what if the money was taken away? I mean, that's like a practical one, but what if the approval of this person was taken away? Would I still keep on doing this thing? Would I do the daily habits if Brian wasn't reminding me? Probably not. So what do I need to change my motivation to? And I think genuinely or generally, it usually comes down to the love of God. And I think that's a good question that I need to ask myself, sometimes to even check myself. I'm like moving towards something I think is good and working hard at something. And then I'm like, is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? What's my motivation behind this? Like, what's that carrot that I'm trying to bite or whatever? And then sometimes I realize, okay, I'm not moving. Sure, it was a good thing, but it wasn't the right motivation behind that thing, even if it has the appearance of. And so I think that's also a general helpful thing if you're wondering right now, like, okay, where do I even start for what I'm doing right now at my job, blah, blah, blah. Like, okay, ask yourself everything. Why am I doing it? Because then also it will set you up for success in these things. Like if you listen to this and you go, I'm going to make my bed because it sounded like a cool idea. You're going to do it for like one morning, maybe two if you're really good. Three would be incredible. But if you go, I'm going to make my bed because I want to practice excellence and it's for God, it's because I love him and I want to practice excellence in an easy way in the morning. Maybe that motivation will help you move differently. And then just practicing that repeatedly makes it easier to see other things in your life and that as well. So that's something like practically for starting this that I have to do for myself every day. Like, okay, why am I doing this? What is my motivation? And try and strip it all away and get down to the core. And then that also tells me if I'm actually going to do it like in a month or in 2 months or 3 months or a year or 5 years from now.
I have to leave one more thought because we left it out in the middle of this podcast that I think is super important, and it ties into something you just said, Caleb. When you understand the Father's love for you, motivation is about love. Most people get lost in their motivations because they're seeking some kind of validation that comes from their actions, or they assume they will never get validated, so they don't care. When you know you're loved as God loves you, the biggest thing to focus on, even in the beginning of meditation, is God's view of you. So you can understand who you are to move forward. Because when you're loved, you can offer it. You can work harder. You can go further. You will endure more. You will conquer more. You will do things for other people. You will think because you're thinking of them, not of yourself, because God's already thinking about you. When you understand how he is consumed with thoughts of you, it frees you to go and think about doing things from a whole different plane. Thing I love about Caleb, and I love his candor, and I just so appreciate all of everyone on here, is we'll give each other grief, but he's never done anything. In fact, none of you have ever done anything because you're going to get approved by me. It's always been out of friendship, out of relationship, out of something better that we do things for each other. And I think that becomes a very, very important factor. And it's part of the core why accountability groups don't go, is because there's not really a love between each other. It's just trying to keep each other in check, which isn't love at all. And so it's a formality. But when you love each other, you just think about soldiers, you think about the movie Band of Brothers, or you think about soldiers doing things for each other. They give themselves, their entire existence, at the willingness of death because they love the person next to them. And so when you realize, but you can't love like that until you've been loved. And so when you realize that God loves you on that level, all of a sudden it allows you to go do these things, that you can become great at everything that you do. And if you have to let it go and move on to another thing, it doesn't matter. If you start out and you become king, but now all of a sudden you're going to become a person on a different level, you're willing to go do it because your identity has always been in this core piece. And that's Mission 300. That's the heart of Gideon. That's the heart of those 300. They had no thought of themselves, but those around them. In fact, if you realize the 300 went and fought for everyone that went home. So just keep that in mind when we're talking about being internally motivated.
Tommy, any final thoughts?
Yeah, the verse comes to me, Philippians 2:14. Do all things without complaining and disputing, that you may become blameless and harmless children of God, without fault in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world. And I just think, like, man, when my boss is who I'm accountable to, and I fall so short. But when I'm accountable to God, the Lord Most High, the guy who created the heavens, the earth, and everything in it, it's like, wow, that is someone to be accountable to. That pushes you farther than you thought you could go when you're accountable to that. When you're accountable to the guy who created the ocean, the stars, the moon, and everything in it, it's like, holy cow, I have so much more in me left to give out of love to the world, right? But when I'm accountable to my boss or to the manager, it's like, oh, that's such a low level. And maybe I'm, through this whole conversation, kind of discovering how my boss kind of did the same thing of, like, he didn't really ever put any accountability on me because he already knew who I was accountable to. And he knew if I lived that I would exceed his expectations. And I'm probably farther along than he thought because there wasn't a limiting factor to that. Because all of a sudden when that person puts on that expectation of, oh, you need to hit this, that becomes the ceiling. right? We'll hit this goal. Okay, I can do that. Boom, and it's done. But all of a sudden when your goal is 10x that and you get to 75% of that, you just blew way out of the water is what that low level of expectation. I think that accountability piece is so crucial of like, you're not accountable to man, you're accountable to God. Now you are accountable for what you do, what your works are here on this earth. So you are accountable to your neighbors, to your friends, to your family. But in a sense, you're more accountable to God. And who are you going to fear? Are you going to fear the expectations of man, or are you going to fear the expectations of God? Because you know what? I can hit the expectations of man, but am I really giving it my all? Am I giving God my heart, my soul, my mind, and my strength when I do that? No. So I would
And
say, and I'm kind of telling myself, go ahead.
is that action causing you to conform? That you're actually not being your true you, or you transform where they get the best of you?
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that's the key right there is like, you're now going, it's almost like a new level. Like you're not even playing in the same field. Like when my expectations are set by my God, already know I'm going to outperform. And it's not about the performance, right? Like I'm already, no matter how I perform, I know I'm God's son.
That's good. All right, we're going to wrap it up with this. I want to leave you guys with one thought on getting back to our question on how do I start this process of being internally motivated. One thing that comes to my mind is to stop waiting for that burning bush moment to happen. And I'm convinced we have such a really wrong understanding of how this stuff works because we've been taught wrong about our heroes. We see Moses at the burning bush having this moment where like a switch flips. We see this angel coming to Gideon and calling him a mighty man of valor where this switch flips. And I don't think that's at all what's happening because Moses had spent 40 years in the wilderness stewing about how he tried to deliver the people already and they rejected him. So it's not as if the burning bush moment was this first time this thought ever came to his mind. It had been growing in his heart for years, even before that, that he wanted to free the people. And then this moment happens where there's an opportunity again. And even with Gideon, when we see him responding to the angel on, well, if God's with us, why has this happened? Why has this happened? I'm convinced he's not in the tone of, well, why has this happened? He's mad. It actually is more like he's being accusative and he's just frustrated. Why is this happening? Because it has been in his heart all this time to free his people. And all of these things started in the quiet internally before that moment happened. And so if there's one thing we can walk away with it for now, don't wait for the moment to happen. Let this start growing internally in the quiet of your room where you are now, and then see where things go. We appreciate you guys being here. Until next time, keep the faith and stay in the fight.